fishing industry has been one of the cornerstones of New England life and development. Ever since the first Europeans set foot on foreign shores, they looked towards the sea for a steady supply of food. Thousands of families have been involved in this long history of New England heritage, and I am proud to say that my family is one of them. I had the privilege to interview my 75-year-old grandfather, Waldo Lovejoy Hart. My papa was born on May 8, 1936, into a family that was surrounded by the fishing industry. He spent many summers up on lovely Pleasant Point, South Bristol, Maine, working on his grandfather's Lobster Pound. His grandfather, Isaac Campbell Harvey, purchased the land in 1904, opening up the I.C. Harvey lobster business. Grandfather Harvey was born in the early 1860s in the fishing town of Halifax, Nova Scotia. He got his first job at age 12 as a bait boy on a local fishing schooner. Having a hard-working mentality in mind, he worked his way up to captain by age 21. These boats would go off into the Grand Banks, fishing for such fish as cod, mackerel, and redfish. During the off-season, he would take his crew up and down the coast, transporting wood, ice, and fish. When Grandfather Harvey died in 1916, nobody stepped up to take control over the Lobster Pound full-time, eventually leading it to shut down a few summers later. A pound owner's job is high labor and almost like putting all your money into the stock market because of the fluctuation in price. His daughter and sons decided to invest their time into less labor-intensive and steady-paying tasks. A while after, however, in the early 1940s, my great-grandmother and her brothers opened it back up again after the war, when there was again a high demand for lobsters. Papa and his older brother Chuck Hart spent many of their summers working away in the Lobster Pound. It was hard laboring work, but they both took pride in never frowning upon it.
A typical day at the Lobster Pound would be that it'd be my brother, your uncle, and I would go over and start moving bait from the bait barrels into a small container, a basket, and take that and put it in a skiff and go out in the Lobster Pound and feed the lobsters in the Lobster Pound. And you know what I mean about the Lobster Pound itself, Carson, because it's you can still see parts of it today, but then it was like a wall that was put around to keep the water in, and also keep sort of the seawater out. But they have sluice boxes, they call. They would open up and let the seawater come in or let it drain out, one or the other. And then we would feed the lobsters, and then we would also help pack barrels and put them for over-the-road trucking in those days. And maybe I've told you, or maybe you've known this before, when my grandfather was running it, they used to move lobsters by boat, called lobster smacks in those days. And those boats, the bottoms, they would put the lobsters in the bottom, and they would have, in one of the holes in the boat, it would be like made like sort of like a basket, because the water would go through there when the boat was moving to keep the lobsters fresh and keep the water circulating. Oh, I think one of the easiest parts is when my brother and I would pick lobster meat for resale, and we'd put them in those days they were quart containers or gallon containers, all made of paper, and we'd fill them up, cook the lobsters, fill them up, and that's when I learned to detest lobsters. I ate more than I put in the containers. In those days, they paid an hourly rate of, like, compared to today, it was like $1.50 or $2 an hour, which it seemed like a lot of money in those days. But really, and it's tough work. It's physically, it's very, very tough. You're using your body, and they said a strong back and a weak mind type of thing, because those barrels aren't light, and when you have to row out and scramble around the docks and that type of thing, it's a lot of physical work, and that was the hardest part.
Yes,
I think one of the most memorable parts for me and also for my brother is that one of the fishermen, lobster fishermen, knew my grandfather. And as when he was a young boy, and knew my grandfather, and he'd always come in and say how he would remember Isaac Harvey, who was my grandfather, sort of standing out on the end of the dock, talking with his people who worked for him, and he said what a real nice, gentle man he was, and what a nice man he was to work for. And that's nice to hear something say about a relative of yours, and I'm talking about my great-grandfather now. And I think the other thing too is the sincerity of people. Sometimes in this day and age you get people who don't be as sincere, they're only thinking of themselves and trying to move ahead and heckle anybody else. And of course you find that attitude no matter where, but I still think that the working in the Lobster Pound then, when I did, everyone was concerned for everybody else. There was a camaraderie type of.
Wave over wave, sea over bow, I'm as happy a man as the sea will allow. There's no other life for a sailor like me than to sail the salt sea, boys, sail the sea. There's no other life but to sail the salt sea.
The Lobster Pound ended up closing down about a decade later, for the pound watcher was being disloyal, lying about profits, and embezzling money. The New England fish industry has always been a constant battle of supply and demand, sometimes a booming industry, and sometimes a rather struggling one. The bittersweet gamble of the fish industry has been a center point of New England history, and the idea, a center point in my own life, to take risks. You win some, you lose some. The attitude still remaining the same, the hope that this could be the day you go out, get lucky at sea, and hit the jackpot.
I've got the sun in the sky, all the water surround me. Oh, you know, yeah, I win now, sometimes I lose. I've been battered, but I never bruise. It's not so bad, and I